Dr Emma Beckett. Gut health, it is such a buzzword along with microbiome and everything, but from a scientific health perspective, what is gut health?
So gut health is multifaceted. So it's about not having symptoms, so not feeling icky in the gut and not feeling bloated or uncomfortable, but there's also a whole bunch of stuff we can't see. So a lot of gut health is about the function of our gut, how digestion and nutrient absorption's working, and even things like the long-term risk for disease that's connected to our gut, whether that's how your gut signals out to the rest of your body. So it's definitely about more than just what we feel and we perceive.
And could you also tell me what microbiome is, just because I know we're going to be throwing that term around a bit, and if just a really basic definition of it so our listeners can know how we're using that in context?
Yeah, so microbiome technically means the sum of the genetic material of all of the microbes that live in our gastrointestinal tract. So we have microbiomes all over our body and we detect them through testing genes. But microbiota, which would be the more technically correct word, is the mass of microbes that we have. So that's going to be bacteria, it can be viruses, fungi, parasites even. But when we talk about beneficial ones, we're mostly talking about bacteria, and bacteria are the ones that have been most well studied.
Now, you talk about embracing through your work, which can you explain what it is that you do, your background as well, because you're a scientist and a nutritionist, but what do you sort of cover?
Yeah, so I'm a food and nutrition scientist and I'm a registered nutritionist, and I work on lots of things. And I think part of that comes from the fact that nutrition is so multifaceted. And so I'm really interested in the interactions in nutrition. So how do our genetics interact with our environment, interact with our food, interact with all of the other things we do in our lives? But I'm also interested in the interaction of how we understand those things and how we talk about them. And because sometimes we get a little bit distracted or carried away in looking at what the science might say. And so, yeah, I'm interested in collecting good data for good science of the biology, but I'm also interested in how we actually talk about that and communicate it.
Well, yeah, making it part of our everyday and speaking to people like me who don't know the science behind it.
Okay, quick question. Have you ever grabbed a drink at the supermarket thinking you're making a healthy choice and then flipped the bottle to discover it's absolutely loaded with sugar? Yeah, same. That's where Remedy Kombucha comes in. Remedy Kombucha is packed with live cultures, organic acids and tea polyphenols, aka antioxidants. And the best part, there's no sugar. Like, for real, for real. How? They brew their bevies the old school way, using a traditional 30-day fermentation that brews the sugar out completely. The result is a kombucha that's full of flavour, made with all natural ingredients and packed with raw live cultures. Oh, and it's never pasteurised, so all that goodness stays intact. Basically, it's big flavour, real ingredients and all natural goodness in every sip. So next time you're doing the grocery run, pick up Remedy Kombucha at your supermarket or local retailer, or grab it online at remedydrinks.com. Want a healthy dose of flavour? There's a remedy for that.
So I'm going to get into some of these things that you research and help your clients with. You talk about the complexity in nutrition, but when it comes to gut health, where do you think we've oversimplified things the most?
There's probably two places that we've oversimplified when we talk about gut health. The first one would be that we've hyper-focused on this idea of good bacteria and bad bacteria.
Right.
And people now have the impression that they can manipulate their bacteria in this very magical way. And the idea that any bacteria is just good or just bad is definitely oversimplified, and it's got us maybe chasing some inappropriate spaces. But I also think we've oversimplified it in just making it about nutrition. And, you know, that probably sounds strange coming from the nutrition scientist, but we often think that our area can save the world and change everything. But gut health is not just nutrition. It's sleep and it's stress and it's exercise and it's how we live and exist in the world. All of that's connected. So I think we've given ourselves a false sense of control and a false sense of which targets we're chasing.
Well, this is interesting because a lot of the time we are given like the little sachets of probiotic for your gut bacteria. What are they actually doing to us?
They might be doing nothing.
Interesting.
So they could be absolutely useless, because if you're adding a probiotic, which is the definition of a probiotic is a bacteria that's going to reach the gut still alive and in the amounts that you need it. If you don't need that microbe, there's no point adding it if you're not missing it. And a lot of the research is about microbiome diversity and, all the different things we have in there. So adding one extra thing might not be useful at all. And worst case scenario, it could be distracting us from all kinds of other healthy things that we could be doing. Because once we have that sachet, we tick that box.
Yeah, you're going to stop the investigation as to why something is destabilized in the first place because you have your little sachet.
Yeah, or we will be distracted from the other tools that we might be able to use, because once we've done something like we've done that thing in the morning, we think, okay, well, whatever we do the rest of the day is, for free, or is it going to make a difference? And really it's all interconnected.
To put this into the practical then, if people say, oh, well, I've started with yogurt, that's apparently a probiotic, or kombucha. Like we talk a lot about kombucha when it comes to gut health. What do you believe, in your professional opinion, the benefits to these two things are?
So yogurt is great. Do not get me wrong with what I say next. But most of us are assuming that every yogurt that we get in the supermarket is a probiotic, because all yogurts wear what we call the health halo of the probiotic yogurts. Not every yogurt is probiotic.
They're not all built equally.
All yogurt is made with bacteria that ferments the milk and turns it into the yogurt. But not all of them have beneficial bacteria that's going to stay alive to get down to the gut and do the good things that we want it to do.
Is it Greek yogurt that is the best, or I'm guessing that's like strawberry or mango, anything that's got those sweeteners that is potentially not doing what we think it's doing?
It's really highly variable. There's some Greek yogurts that are probiotic. There's some Greek yogurts that are not probiotic. There's some flavored yogurts that are probiotic. There's some flavored yogurts that aren't. So it's really about how much of those cultures are being added, what kinds of cultures, how the bacteria is being treated, how the yogurt's being processed. And so you really want to, if you want a probiotic yogurt for gut health, definitely check the label. It will say the word probiotic, or it will say the phrase live cultures. If it doesn't say that, it's not a probiotic yogurt and you might be tricking yourself.
And is that a legal thing that they have to say, like that it is specifically probiotic or has live cultures?
Yeah, so you can't say probiotic and you can't say live cultures if you don't have that bacteria that's alive in those amounts that's going to have that effect, yes.
So you've talked about, in terms of environmental or physical things that impact our gut health, how much of it is shaped by genetics?
This is really tricky because everything is shaped a little bit by genetics, or even a lot by genetics. But then what we do in our diet and our lifestyle and our environment, that's all modifiable on top of that. So I'm really interested in the genetics because it will tell us, which people are at risk or which people do which action to get which benefit. But then sometimes when you talk about the genetics, it stresses people out because they're then thinking about the bits they can't change. And so for me, it's really interesting to understand that a lot of our gut health, a lot of our health responses in general will be dictated by our genetics, or our genetics will give us our jumping off point. But for me, that's not about, being defeatist. It's about saying, well, we will all respond differently. So we can give ourselves a bit of a break if what happens to me doesn't happen to you in the same way. And the example I'd love to use would be lactose intolerance. We all understand lactose intolerance, right? That some of us can digest milk better than others. But that's true for just about everything. And we've got, you might have different numbers of copies of genes that make the enzyme that digests carbohydrates. And so some of us just break down starches better and faster than other people. And some of us will break down fats better and faster than other people. And so even if we're putting the same things down there, it is definitely going to have different responses in our individual guts.
Now, one of the things that you research is how genes change how things taste. I thought taste buds were how we taste. Can you explain how it is that genes change the experience that we're having with food?
Yeah, so the taste buds are the little units that are the structural units that assemble our taste receptors. And then for each of our basic tastes, we have receptors that detect those compounds in food or in the environment. And each of those can have their own genetic code, their own slight little differences. And so if you think of them kind of like locks and keys, where the receptor is the lock and the chemical, the compound in the food, that's the key. Because we all end up with slightly different genetic codes, we end up with slightly different locks, we interact with those keys differently. And so the same compound in food can hit a different person's taste bud, a different person's receptor, and completely change their experience with that food.
Is this the coriander philosophy?
So the coriander is a good example of that. That's an olfactory receptor. So that's a flavor. So flavor is taste combined with smell. So if you hold your nose, you'll cut off all of the smell. And so if you hold your nose while you're eating coriander, you'll only get the kind of bitter undertones of the coriander. But it's exactly the same thing where we have a different gene, a different shape. And because coriander is almost the same shape molecularly, the little volatile compound in coriander that gives it the corianderness, almost the same shape molecularly as the same volatile compound that gives us soap as a flavor.
Yes.
That's why some people, they confuse those two keys because their lock is a similar shape.
It's wild, the two different, like, people go, oh, like, love that, like, herby, like, natural taste, and other people genuinely think it tastes like soap.
And really unlucky people, it tastes like dirt. So yeah, it can be even worse than the soap.
That's fascinating.
But the absolutely wild thing, can I tell you,
yes,
that our taste receptors, not just on our tongue, so they're all over our mouth, and they're changing how we experience food, therefore changes what we want to eat, therefore changes what goes into our gut. But our taste receptors actually all down our gut, all through our body, and they're sampling that environment all the time. And so that interaction doesn't just stop once we finish eating it. Even if it bypasses our tongue, we're still tasting that environment and having reactions to it.
Can I ask a dumb question? Is that why your stomach grumbles? Does it have anything to do with that?
No, your stomach grumbles because of hormones. So that's a hormonal response telling you that you're hungry, and a response to those physical stretch receptors. But the taste receptors in the gut are probably really important for making sure, for example, that we don't eat a poison. So if you drank a whole bunch of poison and it got past those taste buds, because part of the bitter taste is to tell us not to eat poisons, but made it down past that, you do still want to have those signals there to say, oops, get this out of the body. So
not for you.
It makes sense completely. And, you know, detecting how many nutrients are there from an evolutionary perspective, it makes really good sense, but we often don't think about it once it leaves the mouth.
Are there specific nutrients or dietary patterns that we can positively influence our own specific gene expression of the gut?
Probably not in a way that we can actually manipulate. So everything we eat is influencing gene expression, whether it's through the availability of energy and, you know, the role that food plays as fuel, or whether it's part of the chemical signaling process. So food is going to, or nutrients in food, bioactive compounds in food are going to switch genes on, switch genes off all the time. And that's a really oversimplified way of saying it. It's more, you know, encouraging them to make the things they're going to make or discouraging them. It's a bit softer than just on and off. But that's happening all the time as part of all of our processes. There's not going to be just one way of controlling that. Whereas if you put more of something in or take some of something out, you'll have this absolute response, because our body really loves to do what's called homeostasis, which is the science word for keeping everything always the same.
Yeah.
And if we change one thing, other things will change in response. So we know that things will be changing genetically all the time. Epigenetically, we call it, when we switch things on and off, but not necessarily in a way that's going to give us those therapeutic outcomes when it comes to eating food.
There's so much pressure to eat perfectly for your gut. How do you help people move away from that mindset?
I think there's a lot of pressure to eat perfectly, full stop, but there's a lot of absolutism when it comes to what's healthy for our gut. And people will say, you know, XYZ things, just buy this or just eat this. And really when it comes down to what's good for us, for our guts, for our health in general, it's about having options and it's about having tools. So it's not, we don't need to over optimize. We don't need to stick to particular rules, but we do need to have options to help us get the healthy things in. So it doesn't need to be, you see people online, they say, just start the day with chia seeds and then you're good, or just do this one thing, just buy this one product. There's no just. There is never a just in any of these things. It's all about tools. It shouldn't be about rules. And anyone who's telling you there is rules is probably selling you something, not actually giving you science.
There was a clip that went around, I think maybe last week or the week before, that went viral, and it was a gastroenterologist who said, here are 5 foods that I would never eat. And it was processed meat was one of them. I think alcohol was another one. Do you buy into any of those things that you just don't entertain within your diet, or is it a moderation thing?
I mean, for me, the only foods I'm not going to eat are spoiled foods. I think, if something's off or it's been on the floor, it's not safe anymore. I'm probably not going to eat candy out of the hands of babies, those kinds of things. But everything else, yes, there are health promoting foods, and yes, there are less health promoting foods, but it's always about the dose and it's always about the context. So it's all good and well when you can afford to buy whatever food you want to say you will and won't do particular things. But not everyone has the same choices. And sometimes, processing is often about making foods last longer and helping them get to people, because our first priority on eating is to feel full. Yeah. Only after we've taken care of feeling full and having energy, only then can we worry about the rest of nourishment. So, I mean, alcohol, obviously, no real need for alcohol nutritionally, no real benefits nutritionally. Yeah. But there's also a lot of people who alcohol is part of their societal behaviors when it comes to food. And if we can make that kind of societal exception with alcohol, then we probably should be able to do it with other foods that people enjoy as well.
I want to go back to genetics for a second. So when people think food doesn't agree with them, what's sort of the process they can take to figure out if it is genetics or something else is going on to make sure that their gut is healthy and happy?
So I'm going to start with what they shouldn't do, and they shouldn't just quit foods wholesale. If you're quitting just one food, if you're going, that individual product doesn't agree with me.
Like things like, I've decided I'm not eating gluten, like stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a big one. Not eating gluten is a whole category of food. If you just went, there's just this one particular, tea or whatever that is not for me, that upsets my tummy every time I have it, no worries. There's plenty of other teas and beverages in the world. If you're quitting a big category like all gluten containing foods, then there's potentially a knock-on effect for nourishment. And so it actually doesn't matter to the individual person whether it's down to their genes or whether it's down to their microbes or whether it's down to any other thing. They're interested in their responses and their symptoms and how they feel after they eat it. So we don't necessarily need to go and get a test and find out, am I intolerant of XYZ? And we don't necessarily need to have a microbiome test, and we don't necessarily need to have a specific tailored diet. But if we're going to start cutting things out because we're responding to them, if we don't do that right, we risk causing ourselves more problems down the track. And this is one of the reasons I think people feel really good on restrictive diets. When people go on paleo or keto or the carnivore diet, they've cut out all the things they were responding to, but they haven't then given themselves the opportunity to put anything back again. So if you do think a food is bothering your gut, regardless of why you think it, if you're going to do elimination, do it with a dietitian, because a dietitian can guide you through how to actually know what you're responding to and then how to put things back so you don't miss out on anything.
And from your perspective, what are some of the most evidence-based, non-extreme ways to support your gut health? And I guess I want to know from that what wellness trends that you've seen that, you can scroll and then roll your eyes at and go, that is just not real.
So this is going to be completely boring advice and completely unsexy advice, and that's why no one buys it. But all of the things that we already tell people are good for them, our Australian Guide for Healthy Eating, our standard guidelines of eat fruits and vegetables and whole grains and don't eat too many discretionary foods and don't drink too much alcohol, that is ultimately the advice for gut health. That's not cool. That's not fun. It's not saleable.
What's the easy fix, Emma?
Eat more fruits and vegetables and whole grains. And I mean, there's lots of research now that's suggesting things like variety will help. And, instead of saying 5 serves of vegetables and 2 serves of fruit a day, there's people saying 30 serves or 30 different types of plants across a week. If we're not hitting the basics though, why are we worrying about all of the other stuff. And so I would say start with the fruits, vegetables, whole grains, start with being balanced. And that means, not hyper-focusing on one thing over the other thing, then go to variety. And only once you've done all of that, then that's probably where you could be seeing a benefit with like adding something very specific on top. But everyone's starting with the specifics and not doing the foundation. And, that's not a very useful way to build a pyramid.
So one of the things that we've spoken about on Well is microplastics, and you have a very interesting perspective on this that maybe people need after hearing some of the kind of scary statistics that are out there. So you sort of said we've got to look at the benefit to what they've given us. Can you tell me a little bit about what the benefits that you see that plastic and therefore microplastics have given us?
I think we do this a lot when we look at things we're concerned about from a health perspective, and we go, here's what we see as the effect or the potential effect, and we compare that to this utopian universe where none of those problems exist. But our choice with plastic, with microplastic, isn't plastic or no plastic. It's plastic with purpose. And if we take those plastics away, we do lose something. And we lose things like food safety aspects of plastic packaging. We lose accessibility aspects when it comes to plastic. We lose, safety and longevity aspects. And so if we're worried about microplastics and what they're doing to our bodies and how they might be shortening our lives or increasing our risks of other diseases, we very well could have had our lives shortened even more. And we very well could have already succumbed to other diseases, particularly infectious diseases, when you think about the food packaging aspect. So for me, it's not how do we get rid of plastic, but it's how do we use plastic with purpose so that if there are risks associated, we can minimize that risk, but still get the benefits. And the same goes for additives and pesticides and all of the other things that we see as, negative in our food, might affect our gut, might affect our health. If we use them with purpose, we're going to get more benefits and less stress. And going back to gut health, it's wild to me how many people are stressing about gut health, because stress is definitely not going to have a good impact on our guts.
Can you tell me a bit about gut health and its happiness and overall health and how it connects to other organs in the body or other parts of your body?
Yeah, so when I was a baby scientist, we thought that the whole thing about the gut was just absorb the nutrients, and we thought the bacteria that was in the gut was literally just there to block the walls and stop the bad bacteria from getting in. When bad bacteria meaning pathogenic bacteria, food poisoning, essentially. And, in my scientific career, we've learned so much more about what the gut actually does. And it is not just a hub for absorbing nutrients and sending them off to the body. It's making a bunch of signaling molecules that literally go to every other organ and every other cell in the body. And so that is part of our overarching pathways of signaling health and disease and causing different processes in the body that then cause different health and disease. So whether it's brain or hair or anything else, what happens in the gut is always going to be part of that pathway, that starting point to what good or poor health looks like.
And does that also mean mental health wise? Some people say that everything starts in your gut. Do you believe that, or is there science behind that?
So there is a lot of research on gut and mental health, and some of it is a little bit confused and a little bit overstated. So people talk about, the gut is where most of your serotonin is made, which is true, but that serotonin doesn't get up to the brain, for example. So just because it's the same molecule doesn't mean it's doing the same thing. Right. But just because it's not going directly to the brain doesn't mean it's not doing anything, because it could signal through, 6 other different steps and then have an effect on the brain. So there's definitely a link. I think it's very established there's a link. I think what is less established is how we actually use food and diet proactively to benefit that. And I think mental health is another one of those ones where we get tunnel vision on it and we say, if you ate better, your mental health would be better. And yeah, cool, but if my mental health is poor, I'm not necessarily in a position to be eating well to start with. So if we don't break those cycles from, an interactions level, a society level, it doesn't matter how much we know about the science of what's going on with the molecules. We actually need to make that practical for people to access.